Good evening, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Come on in the room. Drop a comment. Let me know you're here. It's another Thursday night. We're grateful to be here, to be alive, to be back with you. We have an awesome show on tonight. I'm so super duper excited about it. I got my teacup. Hey, y'all see that teacup? Hashtag healing is the only agenda. Okay, because we're going to spill some tea tonight, my sisters and brothers. So come on in this space. Hey, Martha. Hey, Regina. I'm going to give you a few more minutes. You know, I like to try to give you a chance to get in the room, but we got so much to talk about tonight. We're not going to take a long time to get to it. So come on in the room. You are going to want to share this episode because we are talking about divorce and the church. That's what we're talking about. So before I get started, hey, Teresa, come on in the room. So I got some really special guests. We're going to have a good time. But as you can see, I'm going to do a little promotional kind of commercial here. I got some paraphernalia for you. Okay, next week, I'm going to be doing a soft launch of some items. And so I hope you join me next week and you can see some of the items that I have that you can be able to purchase and wear while you are on your healing journey. Because listen, just because you're in the healing process doesn't mean you got to look toe up and beat up. Okay, we can still look good while we go through the healing process. Okay, and that's even helpful to the process. So next week, you got to make sure you're here with me because I got so much stuff to share with you. It's new what God is doing. He's expanding the hashtag healing is the only agenda movement. And so I am so excited about what God is doing. Amen. So, all right, I got 9:02. I'm not going to take much longer before I'm going to give one more minute. I'm looking for some folk. I try to honor them, but listen, we got to go sometimes. And again, people can always go back and watch these episodes either on my page, if you're friends with me, or on facebook.com/TJ Nance Ministries. So it's open to the public on that page. So if anyone misses it, they can always go back. Hey, Key, good to have you in the room tonight. All right. I can't wait no more. We got to talk about it. So as many of you know, I started on this healing journey after I got divorced. Well, not even after I got divorced, but when I knew my marriage was heading down the divorce track. It had been on life support for some time. I knew it was on life support. I just never thought that either of us would pull the plug. But once the plug got pulled, here I am in this process of divorcing after, I would say, I guess 17, 18, almost 18 years of marriage. Well, yesterday would have been my 20th anniversary. And I've been divorced maybe a little over a year now. And so to honor the healing journey, to honor this space of healing and processing and coming out on the other side better and not bitter, I wanted us to do a show on divorce. But not just talk about divorce. Divorce, yes, is difficult, it's hard, it's all those ugly things. It's whether you wanted it or not, it's a process. It's not an easy thing to go through. But it can be especially hard for people of faith, especially for ministers, especially for pastors' wives, for children of people with titles, especially for just lay members who are in the church. And we come to church because usually that's where we go to feel better, to get a word from the Lord, and no one addresses it. It's like the pink, not even the pink, the purple, as Dr. Nikki, and we'll introduce her soon, as she calls it, the purple elephant in the room. You walked in the church married, and then all of a sudden you're not. Nobody says anything. It's like nothing happened. It's just nobody acknowledges, nobody extends any healing thing. And the pressure to keep coming to church, especially if you carry a title of minister or something like that, is so great to keep coming to church and act like nothing is wrong. I can just tell you, my experience was I took a leave of absence because I refused to try to pretend that I was okay when I wasn't. I took a sabbatical. It wasn't welcomed, wasn't met with, sure, take the time that you need. But I took it anyway. And because I didn't want to keep sitting on the front row crying through the whole service. And I mean, I was doing the ugly cry. God, you let this happen. I was doing the ugly cry. And I didn't, well, hey, Glenda, I didn't want to keep doing that in front of everybody because that brings attention to you and all of this other stuff. But for the most part, I had to move away to find some healing space. And so we're going to talk about it. Let me introduce our guest tonight. And I'm so grateful to these women who thought it not robbery, right? And it sounds so churchy, but who was just so kind enough to be willing to come on the show, to be willing to share their experience and their expertise. Both of them are doctors. Dr. Nikki, whom I've known the longest because we used to hang out back in college days. I didn't even know she didn't go to my school, y'all. She was just hanging down there with us. Okay, but the gospel girls, me and Becky and Nikki having a good time. Acting saved, kind of straddling a little, we were in college and we were having a good time. Amen. We're going to leave it at that. Dr. Nikki Gilbert, Dr. Nikki Grant now, and just being being in touch with each other through the years. She's got a master's of social work from Columbia. She did her dissertation for her PhD in around DV and the clergy's response to DV. And so she'll talk to us about that as well. And she's a woman of God. She stayed in church. So she has some understanding as well. And she's also an author. And her book is about DV and the First Lady. So she's got a lot to say about this topic. She's got a lot of expertise and she's got a lot of personal experience as well. But then we also have with us tonight, Dr. Elaine Sanders, and she's another one. She's, if you've ever been to Pillar, she's a pillar at Pillar. Okay, she's an educator. She went to my alma mater as well, John Jay College. We didn't meet each other while we were there, but she's still a John Jay girl. And both of these ladies are Harlem girls. Okay, so let's just say Harlem's in the house. Okay, they're Harlem girls. But Dr. Sanders also, I met her while she was talking about her books and at a women's conference doing the work. She's a CEO and co-founder of an organization that helps women, empowers women. And so these women are not just people who've experienced divorce, but they're people with expertise in what they're talking about. They're educated and has experience. And so I want you to please help me welcome them to the show. And this is my first time having two guests on at once. So I'm so excited. Get your tea. Welcome, please, Dr. Nikki and Dr. Elaine. Welcome, ladies.
Welcome. Thank you.
All right, let's see. How can we work this out? I want us to look like there we go. Equal spaces. Welcome to Teaser's Fancy Musings. I'm so excited hey Judith, I'm so excited to have you guys here. As I said, I'm just grateful to you. I appreciate the work that you do, the ministry that you have, the work that you do in the secular, which is, we call it secular, but we know it's all ministry. So I want to give you, though, a chance to kind of just talk a little bit about your experience around this topic of divorce, how you dealt with it, or wherever you want to start off introducing us to you with this topic. And we could start with you, Dr. Nikki.
Well, my experience or expertise, if you will, just comes from my lived experience. I can't tell you I'm an expert on divorce counseling or anything like that. I know that for 22 years I was married and one day I wasn't. And so I officially divorced in 2018. And I'm basically just going through this journey of healing, of navigating my new normal, which is being a single mother. I don't think you could have told me 22 years ago in a white dress, standing before Bishop James Gaylord at Kelly Temple Church of God in Christ, that I would be here.
Hallelujah, thank you, Jesus.
I don't think that I wouldn't have believed you if you would have told me this would be the outcome. But such is life, and life goes on, and here we are. And it's still a journey. It's new. It's very new. 2 years is not a long time, and I'm trying to find peace with it, and I'm trying to get some healing from it. But what I notice in my experience is that more women than not in the church I'm meeting that have experienced divorce. I actually was at Lindenwood Diner before COVID hit with about, I want to say, 5 or 6, maybe 4 or 5 of my friends, and as I was sitting there eating, I said, "Oh my God, we are all divorced," and it was, and these are women in the church and hold positions in the church, and it's just we didn't show up like that, but again, life happens, and so here we are.
Here we are, right? And you and I are probably
I can't hear you, Tisa.
You can't hear me? No? What happened? Can you hear me, Elaine?
Yes.
Okay. So I don't know what's happened to you, Nikki, why you're not hearing me.
I can hear you.
Oh, you can hear me
I
now.
can hear
Okay.
you.
Okay. So you
No.
and I are probably the last one, the freshest ones to this process, the freshest ones to this this new chapter in our lives. But Dr. Elaine, you've kind of been removed now a little while. And so why don't you just kind of tell us about your experience with this, and how'd you even get into talking about this and writing about this topic?
Okay. Well, again, I was married for 14 years. I was married to a pastor, and I've been divorced going on 8 years. So in this process, very much like Dr. Nikki, I never thought when I stood there to say I do, that years later I would be in the position of saying what just happened.
Wow.
What I can say, and like you say, healing is the only agenda. You have to know what's best for you. And if you have children, what's in the best interest of your family. Because in church, like I said, being married to a pastor and being in a leadership role, oftentimes you are looked upon as, everything you do is right and everything. So everyone's looking up to you. So for me, the struggle was, how do I leave, and what are they going to what is going to be said, and where do I fit in when I'm no longer in this position? Because it's a very unique role. Yes, it's divorce is one thing, but being divorced from a pastor is another thing,
Yes,
because
indeed.
your position is different, and as you said, how do you come into a church now? And for me, I think it was really funny because people didn't know how to address me afterwards. So people were still
Exactly.
trying to still call me first lady, and they're like, do we call her Elaine? Do we call her sister? Do we call her? But for me, ultimately, I knew sometimes you have to just know when enough is enough.
Amen. Amen. And I think what you're saying, because my mom ended up, my mom and dad were pastors. She ended up having to divorce my father after 32 years. And there's something to be said when you put in that kind of time, right, into trying to, now that we're removed from this, we all could probably admit that we could have gotten divorced a lot earlier, right? That we could have left a lot earlier. But what tends to happen is women try their best to keep it together. And especially when you're carrying titles like first lady, when you're carrying a title like minister, or your husband's carrying those titles, let's just talk about, this purple elephant though, right? Is we're going through this hardship. And Dr. Elaine, you talked about people just being awkward and not even knowing how to address you. But let's talk about the lost oftentimes. I always think of my mother. I think of my sister, who first was a first lady and ended up divorced. The loss is, in regular divorce, there's a lot of loss. But when you're in ministry, sometimes you have to leave the church that you are in, or there's a loss of relationships. People feel like they need to pick sides. There's so much loss that goes with that. Can you guys just talk to us about what that's like?
I can share. I think what we don't realize is that in divorce, there is a death. This relationship is no longer alive.
Yes.
So you're going through the process of mourning. Even it's almost like having someone you're watching them die before you. So you're watching
Yes.
the relationship die, and you use the life support analogy. So we're watching this relationship die, and when it finally dies, and we buried it in divorce, but yet we're still dealing with the aftermath of how do I now function? And one of the things you asked, a part of my healing process was writing. So I ended up writing in this book called Moving Forward and Letting Go from Broken to Beautiful, because I had to rediscover, Elaine, who are you? What do you like? And realizing, yes, people will take sides to say, well, we were his friend first, or her friend, or whatever the case may be. And for me personally, I just had to say, God, wherever or however, you will replace everything that I've lost,
Yes.
everything that I thought I needed. You will do that. And in that process, I had to figure out who I was. I had to rediscover, who are you outside of the ministry? And I think the hardest thing for me was, again, finding a church. It was like, where do I go when you're accustomed to being, a minister? You're accustomed to being
Yes.
a leader. Now you go somewhere and you're trying to figure out what's the right place.
Yes.
And for me, honestly, I can say God took me totally out of the denomination and into another place where no one knew my name. So I was able to just sit and be fed and not feel like I had to pretend that I was not hurt or feeling awkward. So I did my work. And I think that's important to say, you know what, I'm hurt, I'm upset. Whatever that is, we have to find our peace regardless of
Yes.
everything that happens, because if we don't find our peace, we will go to pieces.
I don't know that people particularly, perhaps they did take sides, but I didn't feel that as much as I felt the people didn't know what to say. Um, I was married for so long. Everybody knew the two of us. We were like the Partridge Family, those little ducks. We were always together. We didn't go any place separate. You saw one, you saw the other. So I think
Yes.
that the hard part was people didn't know what to say, or it was kind of like maybe you heard the murders, or somebody told you somebody said something, but in my presence, I just felt like people don't know what to say, and you want them to say something. I just wanted someone to say, and some people did. Don't get me wrong. I want people watching this to say, "Well, I was there," and I'm not saying that, but I think that in the church, being a divorced woman in the church, I can function. I can put on my game face and I can do whatever task you're asking me to do. But in the inside, I'm screaming. Don't you see that I'm barely making it? Don't you see that I can't cope? Uh, uh, we talk about the Holy Spirit, and we talk about the anointing, and people are tapped in, and a lot of times I was screaming, you know don't you see what I'm going through?
Yeah.
Can you
Wait,
see
wait.
that I'm not sleeping at night?
Yeah.
Can you see that I'm lost? I literally went from living with my mother to living with my husband. I never lived alone. I was never on my own. I went
Wow.
from one situation to the next situation.
Yeah.
It wasn't until I divorced that I lived on my own. And I was like, oh, I'm in. you know, This is really,
Yeah.
there's no one else. I'm in charge, so it's hard being in the church as a divorced woman and trying to keep your head, trying to put on that face for everybody, and keep it pushing. And sometimes you just want somebody to recognize that everything is not okay.
It, and I think, and it's so funny, I was laughing with one of my girlfriends, like, I feel like there's so many of us now in church who walked into church married, then go through the process of divorce, may still be in the church, and we're looking for community. I was laughing with her because I was like, most of the singles ministry these days are divorced women. The young people don't even want to join the singles ministry because they're like, that's for my mother. They don't think it's for them. And we have divorced women coming to singles ministry because they're looking for that community. They're looking, but then we don't even talk about it. We don't have workshops on navigating divorce. We don't mention it. And God forbid if the pastor got divorced, you really ain't saying nothing. The first lady just leaves and nobody even know what happened half the time. You just like all of a sudden you hear through the grapevine she gone. And so it's like we don't want to acknowledge that divorce is happening to us and that people are losing marriages, relationships, as Dr. Hardy was saying in the comments, losing all of this, and we're bleeding on the pews, but no one is addressing the wounds. No one is even acting like they see this hemorrhaging happening. And I don't know about you guys, but you could try to cover it up as much as possible. I could not cover it up. Every song was like, we could have been singing, God is a good God. And I'm like, I couldn't even wear a mask. I was that broken. And yet they see you, and I may have gotten a pat on the shoulder. Somebody may pass me some tissue. A few who had relationship with me may have reached out and said they were praying. But overall, we aren't really talking about it and addressing it. And I had my cousin text me today, and I'm sorry I didn't get to text you back, Amanda, if you're watching. And she talked about just, that same experience, and how oftentimes for us, especially if you're a minister or pastor's wife, it's like you got a scarlet letter on your chest now. You're wearing the scarlet letter like, oh, did you hear what happened to her? She's divorced, which is one of the reasons why I want to talk this, so we can turn that around, right? What can we do to start normalizing what has become normal? Whether we want to admit it or not, divorce has become a normal occurrence in the church world.
It has, and I think that even in my brokenness and even in my bitterness or anger, and my whole why isn't the church helping me, I had to stop for a moment and I had to repent, if you will, and I had to say, you know what, I don't know if the blame really should be on the church, because I just don't know that the church is really equipped to deal with it. Maybe they should be. Maybe there should be referrals, or maybe there should be resources. But I guess that as a clinician and being one for 21 years, I just feel like, I just don't want to feel like, the church, there's no blueprint that I guess that they have. And it's okay to say they don't know how to deal with it. I think it's our job to kind of, these conversations, so maybe they can take another look at it. I did a study on domestic violence in the African American church, and I interviewed some great pastors all over New York City, and some of them were able to tell me what they would do, how they would help the women, and some of them couldn't even tell me. I would send them to Harlem Hospital, and there's a domestic violence coordinator there. So again, I think those of us who are in these helping professions, we need to have these conversations and say, hey, there's a gap here. There's a gap, and this is what the gap is. In your church, I did a little study. In your church, you have about X amount of divorced women. What can we do about that? How can we help them? Maybe we need a support group. But I think that we should start maybe fostering these conversations than just say, and I had to do that. I said, I can't, the church didn't end my marriage. It wasn't there. They didn't make this happen. So I don't want to put the bulk of, what's going um, on the church. And I think that I was feeling that way a little bit. I was just like no one's helping me, no one's talking to me. I had to come to the terms with, well, maybe they don't know how. And these are the conversations that we need to have.
I would like to add, I think divorce will either strengthen your faith or weaken your faith.
Wow.
And many times, and I would definitely speak from my aspect of being a pastor's wife, and you start to see, God, was I trusting you or was I trusting the man? And when I say strengthen your faith, because you can either fall back and say, God, how did you allow this to happen to me? Or you can step up and say, God, you are still God, regardless of
Yeah.
what's going on in my life right now. I'm going to trust you when I can't trace you right now,
That's
because
right.
I am hurt. And I agree with Dr. Nikki in saying, no, the church did not end my marriage. It was not. So there is no like, oh my God, I'm never going back. I fell in love with God.
That's right.
And I lost a lot. I left my house. I packed my kids up. I walked away from my house. My kids walked away from the schools that they were going to, my community. But I was not walking away from my church. We gonna all be in here together because I'm not leaving. I felt such a connection
But
to.
I think that's the whole point, though, right? That most women, especially, turn to the church in their times of crisis.
Right.
And so, while no one's trying to say it's the church's fault, the
Mm-hmm.
point is, how do we better equip ourselves? Because we
Right.
can't afford to just let people keep bleeding.
Right.
Because not everyone has the relationship foundation that we have. And
Right.
to Dr. Lane's point, some it'll weaken their faith and some it'll strengthen. So then, how do we educate the church? How do we
Mm-hmm.
reverse the stigma of divorce, especially for divorced
Mm-hmm.
women ministers?
Mm-hmm.
Because
Well,
it's a little
I think
different
that
for
we need
women.
to start with I think when I had to evaluate and I had enough time to sit and say what went wrong, what happened, what was the breakdown. I will say I had to take it back to the beginning, and I said it needs to start with the counseling. And again, the premarital counseling, I don't know, I can't speak for everybody's church. I can only speak for my experience. And I think I had one day or an hour or two, and that's not enough. I think that we need to start at the root. And perhaps some of our leaders need to be able to say, hey, before you're not ready, or I'm not marrying you right now, or there's some issues that you need to work out, instead of just signing on the dotted line and letting us go and figure it out, knowing that you might not be ready. I think that counseling brings out a lot of things. I married very young. The 23-year-old Nikki is very different than the 47-year-old Nikki. They're definitely, was a whole different person back there, that doesn't know half of what this person that you have before you today knows. So I think that the counseling definitely needs to be there initially. I think it would help. I think it would allow them to look at each other and call some things out and see, are we ready to really into this. So I think that's key, and that's what's lacking. Most of my friends who are in the church, if I ask them if they have counseling, no, or it was subpar, or we didn't really get to the root, or.
Yeah.
Well, I would just add into that and say, we often talk about the church in terms of, you're in church, don't marry someone unless you're equally yoked. And we hear
Right.
those scriptures and we take that and say, well, he believes God, I believe God, and
And
let's
that's
go.
enough.
Um, but I would like to add something that sticks with me is when the Bible talks about know them that labor among you.
Mm.
And we usually hear that when, pastors are introducing someone and say this person and know them that labor among you.
Right.
But marriage is work. And
Yes.
we're laboring together. So I need to understand your work ethic in terms of marriage. I need
Wow.
to understand, how can we have a conversation? What do you do when you're upset? And I think, going to Nikki's point, when we talk, I was 26 when I got married. So that 26-year-old is definitely a different woman than who I am today. But what I realized in that more than anything is that I want to know, I will now make you mad first. Because when we're young, we're like, oh, we want everybody to be happy. And, I don't want to make them upset. I want to see you when you're angry, because I need to
Right.
know what that looks like.
Exactly.
So instead of me probably showing you the best me, I'm going to show you the worst me to see, can you handle me? And I need to
That's
see, can I
funny.
handle that, whatever that is? And I,
Yeah.
I think that's a part of it, because, and I think about being a young woman growing up in church. I grew up in church all my life. People were like, when you're going to get married, when you get married, when you get married. But no one had the conversation of what a good marriage looks like. What,
Yes.
what, what happens when you have conflict? How do we communicate through this conflict? So I agree when Nikki said we need to have counseling or pastors that are equipped, but I think we need to have people who have experienced it and not looking at it as my scarlet letter, but looking at it and saying, I'll have the conversation with you. So maybe in those marriage counseling sessions, you need to bring in the people who are divorced to be able to say, we're going to tell you this because here are some hiccups that no one ever told me. So you don't have to go through what I went through. So I suffered, or whomever, you suffer in silence because you don't know who to talk to, because everyone has this image. And I think also when we're looked upon as being strong, and in this case, women, people don't know what to say because maybe we're not crying during praise and worship. Maybe we're
Right.
not. And I always say, as a pastor's wife, I learned how to have the poker face. Didn't matter what you say. I've learned to just have the face that you go, I can't read her emotions. I can't see how she's feeling. So you do that for so long that now you're in this routine. And I found my favorite word at that time was whatever, whatever, whatever. And that was me not dealing with what was going on. So I was brushing it off. I'm stronger than that. Whatever. Now I find I haven't said that in so long, because now I'm going to tell you how I feel. I'm going
Yeah.
to express to you. I'm no longer, and I can remember, having conversations with Christians around this topic of divorce. And people say, well, if you just pray,
That's
God
right.
will fix it.
Girl, he'll turn it
Last time
around,
I
baby.
checked, God is not a rapist, which means he's not going to force his way if
Right.
you're not willing to let him into that situation, whether that's, yourself or the other person. So we
Yeah.
realize, yes, God can change anything, but you have to have two willing participants. And many times we struggle in silence before we get to that point of divorce, because we're saying the shame and the stigma that goes along with that, and learning to say, how do I, very much like Nikki, I went from my parents' house to being married. And I remember the first time I wrote a rent check, I was like, who wants to do this? Why?
And I think that, just again, it's such a need for a social service component to be in every church, a counseling component to be in every church. And I'm not just talking about the pastor who says he's going to counsel you, but someone who actually is licensed, who has a skill set. I know people think that you're a social worker, you're a counselor, you're a mental health therapist, you're a Christian counselor, you're just talking, I could do that. No, we're not just talking. There's some skill. There's some theory that we have. There's a laundry list of stuff that we've learned in order to help you get to the next phase. If we had that in the church, I think that while I was struggling to end a marriage that I knew was over, the second year in, I wouldn't have gotten all the way to 22 years praying that this year is going to be better, next year is going to be better. Instead,
Right.
perhaps there would have been someone who could have either counseled and help us fix what's broken, or either help me to transition. And that's what I did. I didn't just up and leave. I went to see a therapist, and I met with a therapist for a year, um, every week, and I sat there and I talked about, and she pulled out every possible emotion that was in me, and we worked towards being strong enough to leave. I didn't just up and say, "That's it, I'm out of here," because at
Right.
the end of the day, there was still a lot of love there. It broke my heart. But
Of
it broke
course.
my heart, but I was still packing.
Of,
It broke my heart, but I got my kids and my dog and I left.
right.
But it still broke my heart. You know,
Right.
um, and so I think that the time that we spend in the church, if we could possibly consider those who are equipped, not those who pay the most tithe, not those that are the best dressed,
Right.
those who are related to the pastor, not those who think
With
they
the, with
whether
the
they're
best
but the people who are equipped to get the job done. Because you're dealing with people
Can
who
we
are.
take it back though, Nikki? I didn't mean to cut you off, but I kind of feel like, and this again is DV Awareness Month, so I think it's just this is such a relevant conversation because we haven't really talked about the intersectionality oftentimes when it comes to divorce, where you find out later you realize just that there was some emotional abuse or there was some kind of elements of abuse that possibly could have been there. But when I think of DV and I think of the rise in teenage relationship abuse, right? I feel like we have to take this conversation way back to start getting young people to understand what constitutes a healthy relationship.
Mhm,
No one told us what healthy looks like. No one said this is what a healthy marriage should have.
mhm,
Most I heard was you got to communicate, right? And I'm thinking, yeah, I know how to talk. He know how to talk, and we talk all night, so we know how to communicate, right? No one said how many skill sets you need to navigate marriage. No one said you had to know conflict mediation and management. No one said you had to know and learn the skill of tactfulness, right? No one says you had to learn all of these different things that we end up learning through trial and error when we're in it. But we're already in it. So we're doing on the job training. And I'm wondering with the church, and again, my intention is never to place blame. But what I will always do is critique us because I've given my heart and my soul to this institution called the Black Church.
mhm,
So I love it and I'm going to fight with it till we be better because I've seen the damage done when we haven't been at our best, right? I'm a product of the damage that was done when we haven't been at our best. So for me, I feel like part of the critique is saying, where are our gaps? Where are we just acting and leaving people when we could do what you're saying, have skilled people on hand, or we can spend a little more time not paying for not praying just for people with the biggest offering, but praying for the broken, praying for those like so there's so much that we can do. But if we start with young people, right, helping them understand what a healthy relationship looks like. Because I promise you, I'm so worried about singles of today, the young people, because they have been told, girl, you got to wait for Boaz, you got to wait for. They've made these men that they should be waiting for look like he should almost be Jesus.
mhm,
And unfortunately, the truth is, most men just want to be able to eat, sleep, fart, and have some sex when they want it. That's what they really just want. Simple life, right? They just want to eat, sleep, go to work, don't mess with their money, They want to be able to have intimacy when they're ready. And it's simple as that. But we've made for singles it look like, oh, he's gonna walk in like Boaz and save the day. He's gonna see you in the field working hard, and he's gonna be like, oh, look at her. Let me rescue her. And we still selling some of this imagery to single women, and it's not real. Not to say that there are, and again, I'm not saying that there are good men. I'm saying that this image that they're like saviors when they're really just regular people, I feel like is giving them is doing them a disservice. The push to constantly get married. Like she said, well, when are you gonna get married? When, my mother always tells the story of how they were always trying to, any drunk walked in the church in Brooklyn, they would say, Mary, maybe God can clean him up for you. Like they didn't care. They didn't care what he looked like. It would just be like, he drunk, you need a husband. Maybe God can, let's put him in a nice suit and there you go. How many women have we married over to gay men? I mean, we're going to talk about it. Let's talk about it. We haven't necessarily done a good job in this area. And I just think we got to take it all the way back and start defining what is healthy for our young people in church. So they can recognize it before they even get in it. I don't know. That's my thoughts.
I think that sometimes we have to see what we don't want to see, because there are signs. If you really want to take off the rose-colored glasses, then we will definitely see the signs. The person you're dealing with, but I think that we choose to say, well, he's paying attention to me, or he's a prospect, or he's good enough to marry, or I could see having a life with him. I think that as women, sometimes as soon as the guy starts paying attention to you, it seems like you're at the altar and he's all the way back here. I think that we have to change our mindset, and we have to know our own self-worth. I think that being married to a minister was very challenging, because a lot of times, and I'm going to say this, and I hope people don't try to attack me, but I love the church. I really do. But a lot of times you have people in the church who are big fish inside the church, and they're like bubble guppies outside the church. Nobody knows them. They got all the church keys. They got this, they got that. And no one knows you outside of the church. And so a lot of times that wife, she's the one that really got it going on. And so it's a struggle. And I found that it wasn't too much of a struggle until I became Dr. Nikki. And that became the struggle. And I found that people would ask me to speak, to do this, to do that, and I would say no. And I didn't say no because I really wanted to say no or I couldn't do it. I said no because other people had an issue, because nobody was asking them to do anything. But so I found myself taken down so people egos would be all right, and there wouldn't be an issue. You understand? And it's unfortunate because I had to kind of stifle who I was. I have several earned degrees. I was out here really doing this work. I have the student loans to show you. You understand what I'm saying? I lay hands on me and said, okay, you called and here's a collar and some clothes and you're it now. And so that became the struggle when you felt you weren't getting enough airtime, or your spouse. So in women, we got to do a lot of that. We got to stroke a lot of egos, and sometimes we get lost in that. And so while I was never physically abused, because I have 5 career criminal brothers, so that wasn't gonna happen. So I was physically abused, but I think that there was a lot of emotional abuse that was going on, and there was a lot of head games. And again, when you marry young, you're in a different space than you are when you become older. And when you're younger, you're like, oh, don't leave, let's work it out. And then when you something about those 40s, you're like, okay, let me help you pack. You leaving? Let's go. Because
Yeah.
you've grown up and you've matured. And now you know your worth and you know what you want to take and what you don't want to take. But I think that, you know, being a woman in the church and being a married woman in the church, you know, I had to fake a lot of things, just because I just didn't want people to see what was really going on, and I wish that there was an opportunity to say, I need help.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that speaks to safe spaces, right? I've been on this campaign to bring back safe spaces to our churches, because this is where we go. We come to the church as the house of refuge. Most women, especially Black women, come to the church before they'll go anywhere else. So they're going to come to the house of God looking for that safety, looking for some refuge. And while we may not mean to, but our silence and our neglect and failure to recognize the hurt can leave them even more damaged and wounded. So, I mean, I so appreciate you ladies sharing your experiences, talking just about what you went through, what you experienced, what you had to go through to get to the other side. Um, Talking about being honest and transparent, that you're still in the healing journey, you know. And it's amazing just how the journey takes on different forms and takes on different looks, and processing all of the grief that goes with it. But I think you both have said this throughout your conversation, which was that you never left God nor the church. So let's end it, because you know we church girls. We're gonna end on the hope of Christ, right? We're gonna end on what sustained you, what got you through, what's getting you through, what is strengthening you, or has strengthened you. Dr. Sanders, you told us about that piece of anonymity, right? Being able, and that's how I ended up in Jersey. I was hurting. That I knew nobody in the church but one girl, and I really didn't know her. I came from Brooklyn well, came from the Bronx to back to Jersey with no family, nobody over here, to be in this church because I knew God led me there. But part of the appeal of that church was that piece of anonymity. I didn't have to be the pastor's daughter. I didn't have to put on the face that, oh, bless God. I didn't have to speak church. I could literally sit in the back and allow God to deal with me. So you just tell us a little bit, and as you're telling us, tell us what you're doing now. How can people connect with you? How can they get your books? But what are you doing now, to or have or relied on to sustain you through the healing journey?
I think
Um,
when, oh, go ahead, Elaine, go ahead.
for me, honestly, in my journey is having a support group, having people around me who genuinely loved Elaine, not
Yes,
the titles, but genuinely loved Elaine and was willing not to judge me, but to love me while I was hurting and in my process of healing. I think that a lot of times we feel like we have to put the mask on for others. But when someone knows you and can say, what's really going on? And
yes,
know, even in your silence, how to pray for you. I tell people all the time, I'm not big on a whole lot of friends that's always around me. Can you catch me in the spirit and say, something's not right? That means more
yes,
that you're able to pick up, to know me well enough that even when I say
yes,
I'm fine, you know I'm not fine. And so I think it's building those authentic relationships that you can have real conversation. And I think it's also key, Dr. Nikki and I had conversations without even realizing we would be here, in our own personal journeys. And she could tell you, I had authentic conversations.
yes, yes,
And I believe that if I can't be true to me, then I can't be true to what God has called me to do, because a part of my testimony is the test that I went through. So I'm not ashamed of that story. It was a part of my story that made me better, not bitter.
yes.
I'm
Glory
better
to God.
today as a result of what I went through than being able to say life is perfect, life is fine. And just if I can just add this piece, You know, I have 3 children and I have a daughter with multiple disabilities. And even in that, knowing that that played a part in why, a part of
Yes.
my was because it wasn't perfect. I didn't have the quote unquote perfect family
Wow.
from
Wow.
that sense. So I would say being authentic, loving who you are, good, bad, or indifferent, and loving yourself through your process, and having to know I'm worth it. I'm worth someone loving me. I'm worth whatever it is, whatever my next is. And I like to say we get ready for our next and our now. It hurts right now, but when you go to your next, you'll
All
be
right,
like, okay,
preacher.
I understand why I had to go through that journey. So if people want to get in touch with me, I have my website is www.harlemgirls, the number 4, the word ever, .com.
I think
Elaine, you
for
tried to
me,
preach. I think I didn't see it.
I
I
think
heard it. I was about to put a preaching voice to it. Okay, I heard it.
I
Thank
think
you.
for me it was the church, my church. I found strength going to New Life, and that's why I was not going to leave. I was ready for us to all be there together, divorced or not, because there was strength there. And even though, and I have a lot of good, solid relationships there. I mean, it was just I found peace there. I had Pastor Shelley in there, Tanye, and my friend Shaquan, and Kim, and it was just so many people that I felt so comfortable being there. And then Bishop Rochford is just he's just a preaching machine. So it's just like it was for me. I knew that if no one touched me, if no one laid hands on me, if no one gave me a hug, I was going to get a word that when I left, I was going to be at peace. And I feel that way today, that there's comfort there. And I know that there's so many solid people um, in that ministry that I needed that. I couldn't see going anywhere else. And I wasn't going anywhere else. And it didn't matter to me who knew what and who was saying what. Because anybody that knows me, I'm going to tell you what it is straight up. And I don't care, because I know that I have one life to live, and I have to live the best life that I can. And it's not all great, and some days are better than others. It's just 2 years that I've been divorced, and like I said, I'm still trying to navigate this new normal,
Girl,
and I'm and
you
I'm,
and
and
me
I'm
both.
doing the best that I can to do it,
Yes.
and I have some great fillers, to fill up my time. So it's not but right now, what I'm doing, I decided to start the support group, and it's called the Healing Part. We meet Fridays, so we're meeting every third Friday of the month. We meet tomorrow, actually, and it's a group just for divorced women, and we're on a journey to healing. It is a group that I came up with. It's a support group that I came up with. However, I'm not the facilitator. What I have asked is that women who have been divorced for 5 years and longer, I've asked them to come on every month and facilitate the group. And we're looking just to get some strength, and just to try to find ways to make it through, and know that we can love and live again. I don't believe that I'm going to be single forever, and I hope that I don't take the same issues into the next relationship. So we're learning how to grow and and
Yes.
and just be whole again. So that's what we're doing. The third Friday.
How do they reach? How if they want to participate? How would they
So
find
they
out?
can reach out. They can reach out to me. I'm on. You can reach out to me on Facebook, Dr. Nikki Grant. Grant, Grant, like the $50 bill. Um, so you can reach out to me on Facebook. You can inbox me, or you can send me an email at drnikkig04@gmail.com. So you can reach me on Facebook and Messenger, or you can email me, Dr. Nikki Grant 04 G04 at gmail.com.
ladies, did I get that right? Dr.
Yep.
Nikki G04. I so appreciate you. We could talk about this but forever because there's so many facets to it. I'll give you um, a funny thing that happened to me today. So when we talk about just the process, so I went to a laundromat today because my unit doesn't have laundry in it. It's right across the street. So I go across the street and I'm doing my laundry. It's 7:30 in the morning. And I go to put some of my clothes in the dryer. And I see that the attendants, when you drop off their clothes, when they're doing your clothes, they put the receipt of whose clothes it belongs to on the dryer or the washing machine, right? So they know which clothes goes to which customer. I'm putting my clothes in. I look at the dryer above me and I see the tickets that has my old address on it and my old tenant's name. And I'm like, only this would happen to me. That I'm over here doing my own laundry while my old tenant is dropping his off. And that feeling like this, and I had to laugh about it though, because it's part of the process. When we talk about loss, one of the hardest things that I've had to deal with is the loss of my beautiful washing machine and dryer that was an LG red. It was fairly new. The diminishing feeling, I'm laughing, but it really feels so diminishing to have to go back to a laundromat.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and I lived single, so I used to, and I didn't even do that for a long time.
Yeah.
But when I got my first apartment, I bought me a washing machine to dry. They let me have it in the unit, and so to be back at the laundromat has been a hard thing for me. And I like, of all days, I finally go and I go see this, right? And it's just, again, it's a process. It's bumps and bruises you can get along the way. It ebbs and flows. But I'm grateful because God has been with all of us, obviously, through it all. And for that, I am grateful that God has been with you, that God has allowed you to be a voice, to offer up um, help for other sisters, for other women who are going through the process that you've been through. Dr. Nikki, I'm so proud of you with your support group. We've had authentic conversations too, and you like, we need a support group. And I'm like, yo, I ain't starting it. And you go ahead, go forth. And you like, just like that, it was here. And I'm grateful for you, Dr. Elaine. You've been doing your thing for a while. We appreciate you for being on this show. May God continue to bless the works of each of your hands. I'm glad because looking at the two of you, and I'm hoping those that are viewing can see that you don't have to look busted and disgusted just because you're hurting. You don't have to look like what you've been through, but that there can be um, actual testimony that comes out of this hard experience, that God is a keeper. Okay, we ain't even gonna go there because that'll start us on the whole that God is a keeper. He's a sustainer. When you thought you couldn't take no more, he gives you an extra dose of grace, an extra dose of strength to help you on that journey. And the way that the miracles, I don't have time to talk about the miracles that God performed, so I wouldn't lose my mind, so I wouldn't feel so like, God, what are we doing? Like I needed to walk away. I'm grateful. And I know that that's you guys witness as well, because we're sitting here talking to you and looking at you. May God bless your children. I can imagine the process with having kids. I know I watched my sister go through it, and even just how it impacted me as a child of my parents as they divorced and I was grown. So I know that it takes a toll, but God is better than good. He's with us through it all. And I am so, so grateful for that. Ladies on the line, gentlemen on the line, please share this with someone you know might be going through divorce, who might need to feel encouraged, who feels like their voice has been silenced in the church, that no one's recognizing their hurt, their pain. Tell them they are not alone, that even when you think nobody else sees, God sees and he knows, and he will come through, whether it's through somebody else or through something like this. God will show up. He does all the time. May not come when you want him, right? But he's always on time. Thank you guys. I need you guys to be with me next week as well as we talk about, and I show you what God is doing with the hashtag healing is the only agenda. Why? Because brokenness is just too expensive. May you have a good night. God bless you all.